Congressman Paul.
Yes, it is.
Hi, it's Peter Schiff. Thanks for coming on my show.
So you're a radio man now.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Well, first, let me congratulate you on being the father of a United States Senator. That must make you proud.
That was very nice. We were very pleased with that.
Did you ever expect that to happen a few years ago?
Well, I always thought Rand would go into politics sometime. I didn't know when or where or what the opportunity would be. But when I think back 2 years ago, he was emceeing a few events up in New Hampshire for me. And if you'd have asked me then, in 2 years, he's going to be in the U.S. Senate, I would say, now how in the world would that happen?
I know. I know you tried that once yourself back in Texas, and you couldn't overcome the Republican establishment that was working against you, and now you get to see your son overcome the same.
Events are different now. Events are moving along, so the anti-establishment is moving over to become the establishment. Some of the Tea Party people are becoming more dominant than the people who've been around for a long time. So I think timing is a big thing in politics.
Yeah. Well, you've been my favorite congressman for many, many years, going back to the first time that you were a congressman before you took a hiatus. And I always thought you were my congressman, even though you weren't in my district. And now I guess I'll feel the same way about Rand, that now everybody has a senator, even if they don't live in Kentucky. And,
right.
and hopefully having two Pauls in Congress will maybe make a difference if you can, bang some sense into everybody else's head.
Yeah, we'll need a lot of help yet, too.
I know. Unfortunately, that's true. Now, let me ask you about this new compromise bill between Obama and Congress. First of all, how are you going to vote on this thing?
Well, it's an atrocious choice, and the absolute answer can't be given yet because they haven't finished writing it yet. But as it stands, if it will prevent the taxes from going up, that's probably like an $800 billion bonus to us, or prevention, or there'd be that much many taxes. The costs are probably in the area of 40 to 50, which is hard to measure too. So comparing the two, I would say the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages. So I cannot see me supporting anything that would literally, support raising taxes immensely at the beginning of the year. So I would probably vote for
it's
it.
a difficult choice because I agree that any time you have the opportunity to keep money out of Washington, you want to do it. I actually heard some Democrats trying to describe this, preserving the tax cuts for the rich as being the equivalent of wealth redistribution, as if letting the people who earn the money keep it counts as redistributing. It's the opposite of it's preventing redistribution. But
absolutely opposite. They just totally reject the marketplace.
But the problem I have as an economist, I know that borrowing and spending is more damaging to the economy than taxing and spending, because when the government borrows, 100% of that money comes out of the store of capital that might have financed investment and capital formation and business expansion. But when you raise taxes, a lot of that simply comes out of consumption. So I know that by borrowing instead of taxing, this bill is actually going to hurt the economy. It's not going to help it.
I don't have a lot of argument with that, but the whole thing is if you accept the principle that taxes is better than borrowing, then they're going to start taxing us to the hilt. So I draw the line. I don't want to raise taxes on anybody, but of course I think I'm more consistent than others because I vote against every single penny for spending.
That's the problem.
Any money at all.
What happens is when you let them raise taxes, they end up spending even more than if they didn't have the taxes because there's no responsibility there.
And the other irony about this bill is that, the two sides, let's say this goes through and they get together, the Republicans get a little bit, the Democrats get a little bit. In the big picture, it will make the deficit much worse.
The bond market is already responding. It's really been beaten up in the last few days. And there are people that actually think that the reason bonds are falling is because the stimulus is going to work and if the economy is going to improve, and so we won't need as much quantitative easing from the Fed. I think they've got it backwards. I don't think the stimulus is going to work. I think all it's going to do is stimulate bigger deficits, which means the Fed's going to have to buy more bonds if it wants to stop interest rates from rising, which means more money printing and more inflation, and that's why the bond market is falling.
Yeah, and then how about an inflationary premium worked into it now? People are thinking about that as well. So it is an ungodly mess. But I'll have to wait and see what the final version is. But right now, I would have to support preventing those taxes from going up.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Personally, I'm a taxpayer, and I don't want my taxes going up. But I'm not going to take the money I save by not having a tax hike and invest. I'm probably going to buy more gold. I mean, that's the problem. You know, I like this new definition. You know, they're calling this a tax cut. How is it a tax cut? It's my taxes aren't going up. It's like if I told my employees, hey, congratulations, you're going to get a raise. I'm going to cut your pay by 10%. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, I was thinking about cutting it by 20%, but because I'm only cutting it by 10%, I call it a raise.
Yeah. Well, that's why this is so messy, because we're not voting to raise taxes or lower taxes. We're, voting to prevent something that's going to happen automatically. So if we don't do it, taxes will be much higher.
Right, but I don't look at that as a tax cut. I just look at it as my taxes aren't going up. So
right. Technically, that is absolutely right.
So it's not going to have any kind of stimulus. People say, oh, we're going to have these tax cuts to stimulate the economy. The only real tax cut in there is this little payroll tax gimmick, which is just like the stimulus checks that we got under George Bush. Just giving people more money to spend isn't going to grow the economy. I mean, we're already spending like crazy.
No. I mean, I think it is a further example where things are totally out of control. The spending's out of control. The deficit's out of control. The printing is out of control. The whole
Well,
works.
can you and Rand do anything to rein this in? To try to, is anybody talking about part of this bill? Yeah, they're extending unemployment benefits, but don't these guys know that if we pay people not to work, they're not going to take jobs? There are a lot of low-paying jobs that are going unfilled because the government is giving people a better alternative, which is to get paid for not working at all.
Well, no, I wished I could tell you yes. We're on the verge of reversing this, and we're going to have so many people joining us and switch their votes. That's not going to happen, because I don't even think they're talking about the real problem. To me, it isn't a budgetary problem or a fiscal problem per se. To me, it is the philosophy of government problem. As long as we believe that we have to maintain a world empire, and as long as we believe in welfare, everybody's going to agitate for their share of the loot. So nobody's challenging that. I don't even want to endorse the principles of welfare redistribution. I don't want to endorse the principle that we should have troops in 700 bases, 140 countries.
Well, the problem is
that is never brought up. Nobody wants to deal with that, and I don't think you can solve your problem until you do.
Well, we have a collision course with reality coming, because the people that want something from the government is getting bigger and bigger, and the people who are able to supply revenue to the government is getting smaller and smaller. And, we've got all kinds of fiscal time bombs going around right now in all the states, particularly the states that are, the Democratic states. These they're literally bankrupt right now. We're going to have all kinds of, state sovereign debt crises happening here, just the way they have them over there in Europe. And then we're going to have the crisis for the federal government itself, especially if it tries to bail out all these states.
No, it is coming, and it will come, and that's how it will be brought to an end. And I think people should understand what it's going to do to the dollar. To me, it's the bonds and the dollar, and as you pointed out, the bond prices, the bond interest rates are going up. The 10-year note is much higher now. So I think it's starting to move. I think it's a bad sign. I think it's all going to end. And this stuff we're talking about how this seemed like the major event of the day on what we do on taxes and all. I think it's going to be minor compared to, and you understand what
I'm hoping is, look,
prices will be like.
I mean, we're not going to have a soft landing. We're having a crash landing. But what I'm hoping is maybe that you and Ron can somehow grab the controls of the airplane and somehow, it'll be a bumpy landing, and we're all going to get pretty beaten up. But if we can do something in time, maybe we can walk away from this crash. I mean, we're going to be battered and bruised. But if we keep following these policies, we're going to drive this plane. I mean, it's going to blow up. It's going to disappear. It's going to, in smithereens. It's going to be a blazing inferno.
We're back to getting as many people prepared for this as possible, and you've been making a living at this. People need to be prepared for the worst scenario, because the more of us who understand it and who are protected, the more likely it is we can pick up the pieces. Now, what you're saying, can we make a difference? And you make me sound like I'm too pessimistic that I can't promise you that we can turn this around. But I work on the assumption that the more people we reach, the more they understand. Just think of the difference in the last 2 years about looking at the Federal Reserve. Before, nobody even looked at the Federal Reserve. Now they're on the defensive, which is very healthy for us. This means that when the reforms come, maybe they should never have as much power. We need to blame the Fed for most of these problems. Not all of them, but most of them. The way even the spenders in Congress couldn't have spent if they didn't have the Fed there to fall back on and let the Fed monetize the debt. So I think we're making headway philosophically outside of Washington. But in Washington, we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, speaking about, the Fed, I don't know if you probably saw Ben Bernanke on 60 Minutes, and, he was sweating and quivering more than when I see you question him, when he's talking in front of the House. But can you believe the guy actually said, we're not printing money, we're just buying treasuries?
Yeah. Did you see Jon Stewart's play on that?
Absolutely. In fact, I played that.
That was the funniest thing.
What's amazing to me is it takes the Comedy Central to find that clip. Why wasn't CNBC? Why wasn't Fox Business? Why wasn't the financial news picking up on this? Why do we have to get better news from Comedy Central and Jon Stewart? Anyway, stay tuned. We have the rest of that interview coming right after the break, so don't go away.
To President Obama, Secretary Geithner, Madam Pelosi, and all of the socialist econ professors across America.
We're sorry.
Peter Schiff is back on the air.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on the Peter Schiff Show, and we are in the middle of an interview that I recorded with Congressman Ron Paul just under 2 hours ago, so let's pick it back up where we left off before the break.
Yeah, and I remember him assuring me in the committee, we will not, monetize debt. But that was when he was in the process of fulfilling his $75 billion worth of monetizing it.
Well, I guess he had
anymore.
I guess he had his fingers crossed behind his back. Yeah. It was kind of like, how long did Henry Paulson's bazooka remain in his pocket? He'll be fired that thing as soon as Congress tapped him on the helmet. But hey, I wanted to ask you a question about this other thing that this bill to pay black farmers $50,000 a piece, about 90,000 of them. I mean, are you familiar with the bill that was passed through?
We had a vote on that, and of course I voted against it. I think it was it's an outrage. I think 3/4 of the individuals applying for it has no relationship to it. But even those who expect to get it, it's a generation ago. And how can you do this? How can you steal from other individuals and make up for the mistakes that governments have made?
I don't even know
for a program that shouldn't have even existed in the first place.
Well, forgetting about that, obviously This is talking about agriculture loans that shouldn't even be there. But here's what I understand, Ron. If there were a group of farmers, let's say there were a handful, 100, 200 black farmers that actually were discriminated against in getting these loans, why do other farmers who just happen to be black but who were not discriminated against, why do they get money? I mean, isn't that just racist to say because a black farmer was discriminated against, every black farmer gets a $50,000 check, even if you never applied for a loan yourself, even if you were never discriminated against? And apparently you don't even actually have to really be a farmer. All you had to do is try to farm.
Yeah.
I mean, I just work on a farm. You could have just worked for a week, changing the manure, this whole ridiculous.
This is why the collectivist idea that you band together and join with others and you pressure the producers to pay the non-producers no matter what comes up. I mean, this is one example of what they do constantly.
Yeah. So how many new congressmen in this, this Republican sweep, the Tea Parties, how many do you think you've identified that you think will really be able to work with you and join with you so it won't be, 360 to 1, that there'll be 2 or, how many people can we see voting against big government, you think?
It's hard to say. I personally haven't met most of the members, very few. But I think you'll know probably in February sometime what will happen because the votes will identify those individuals rather quickly.
Have anybody reached out to you?
Well, I knew a couple of them. Justin Amash from Michigan was an extremely good candidate, and I helped him, and he was elected handily. So I think he's going to be a strong ally. And there are several others, but that won't change the voting pattern. I think what's happening now is there's a shift in attitude already with the people who are still here. I believe in the in the argument that Congress is a reflection of the people. When the people change, the Congress shifts a little bit. Because, the very middle-of-the-road Republicans have been around for a long time and now are talking about, well, we need to look at the Federal Reserve. We need to do this and we need to do that. So many of them are getting on the bandwagon, and that's good. I think that's a good sign.
Well, hopefully
so attitudes are changing, and I think with this new group coming in, it's going to even be better.
Hopefully having an ally in the Senate, will help, because, I wanted to be a senator because I thought there was more power in the Senate. Hopefully Rand will try to use that filibuster and try to stop, I really wanted to filibuster an increase in the debt ceiling. I'd really like to see, Rand try to lead that and maybe pull it off. If we could simply stop the government from borrowing, then we can begin to fix the problems.
Yeah, and I think they're talking about that over there. It's still early since we haven't established the new Congress yet, but I think there are a few in the Senate that might well do that. But that is a big vote. When that comes, we'll see what happens, here in the House and every place, because it won't go unnoticed if that debt increase isn't voted for. That is going to have an effect on the markets and everything, and they'll come out just like when we had the collapse in '80, how they terrorized everybody and said, well, what's going to happen if we don't do this? Everybody rushed to do it. That's what they'll do with a debt increase. If you don't do this, the world will come to an end.
Yeah, like the world depends on America going deeper into debt.
Yeah.
In fact, we're never going to solve our problems until we stop going into debt. And the problem is that you got a lot of congressmen that campaign, I want a balanced budget amendment. Okay, well, let's balance the budget right now without an amendment. Just don't raise the debt ceiling, and there you go.
Yep, they would have to do something. Pay your bills as your money comes in.
Yeah, because if we passed the balanced budget amendment, it'd be the same thing. We couldn't go deeper into debt. Anyway, no, Ron, I know you got to run. I think you got a vote coming on tonight. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. Hopefully you'll be back and a few times, especially if we can syndicate this show and get it to a bigger audience.
Good luck with your show.
All right, thanks. Keep up the good work.
The Peter Schiff Show.